My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and I'm very pleased today to welcome an individual who has had a amazing career in the professional wrestling business, an individual that has cut across several genres. The very excellent guest today on the Great North Wrestling podcast, that would be Babydoll Nicola Roberts. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into some discussion in terms of your career and take some fan questions, I noticed that you've been making a lot of appearances lately, or seem to be. Can you catch the fans up as to what you've been up to lately?
Oh, I've been really busy. I've had two shows with All Star Wrestling. Gary Damron went up to West Virginia for two of his big, huge events. I've made several appearances with NWA, as you can tell by the hat. My daughter is trailblazing for them, Samantha Starr. They just did some posters with her, featuring her for their July the 9th in Chicago for the NWA TV taping. She's going to be part of that. Upcoming, I've got 4th of July. I'm going to be in Gilkey, North Carolina. My friend Chris Hamrick, ECW superstar, is going to be part of that event, and I'm going to be out in Gilkey, North Carolina on 4th of July. And then the following weekend, I've got another appearance. I'm not supposed to say on that one because I almost spilled the beans because it's going to be a surprise. Then July the 29th, July the 28th, it's WAW Wrestling out of Chicago. We're going to be at the Tinley Convention Center. Samantha Starr and I will be making our premiere appearance for WAW, taking on their here, if I'll pull it up right here for a second. Let me see if I can get it. Because it's a new girl. But anyway, wait, let me see if I can find it.
No worries.
Oh shoot, I lost it.
Some of the fans are asking, when are you coming to Louisville?
Oh my gosh, I drive through Louisville every once in a while, but Cornet seems to have a mainstay on that. But coming up with my appearances, so I've got WAW with Samantha on July the 28th in Tinley Park, and then I've got the first weekend in August, The Gathering in Charlotte. I'll be there on Friday and Saturday for Tony D'Amato and his family, the huge event that they have going on in Charlotte. Probably 300 wrestlers will be in Charlotte for that one weekend. Then I've got Wilkesboro, North Carolina with George South. I'm making an appearance with him. And then I'm going to be in Ashland, Kentucky in October the 7th. And then The Gathering the last weekend in November for Tracy Myers for WrestleCade. So
wow.
busy.
I was going to say, it sounds like you have an extremely robust schedule, almost like back in the day. Would you agree?
Well, not even close to back in the day, but my husband's always going, there's another date on the calendar. Why didn't you tell me there's another date on the calendar? But I love it. I love going out and being a part of the wrestling experience, reliving memories with wrestling fans. It's amazing and very humbling.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, when you were growing up, you came from a wrestling family, and at a young age decided that you wanted to get into the business. Can you, given the fact that you're a trailblazer in many ways, can you talk about how that decision came about and your training? I think you were trained, correct me if I'm wrong, under the tutelage of Nelson Royal and Jake Roberts.
Right. Well, I worked with Jake whenever I was in Dallas for World Class Wrestling. He taught me how to do the DDT, and it was just short matches that I had with Stella May. So I just needed to have one or two moves just to end the match, and then it was over with. And the DDT, as everyone knows, is a very devastating hold. And once you put on someone correctly, I mean, they're out. So that worked out real well with what I had to do with Stella. And then I didn't have to do really any wrestling while I was with Crockett. I had the 14 bashes with Jim Cornette, but it was just basic arm drag, knock the crap out of them, get the pin, and then that was it. Whoever I was teamed up with had more of the match, and then Cornette just put the cherry on the top and gave them the finish that the people wanted, and it was a huge pop, and people were really happy with it. Cornette and I made a ton of money, so it worked out really well. Then in the summer of '87, I went and stayed with Nelson Royal at his ranch, and Rockin' Robin and I, oh my gosh, we worked out in the morning and the evening because that's the only time it was cool enough to work out. And we would take bumps in this ring that he had set up in one of his big horse features, one of his rodeo arenas. And we sweated and took bumps and learned what we had to learn. And she went on to WWF and was one of their women's champions and did marvelous, had some super matches with Sherry Martel. And it all worked out. So I trained, but I really didn't have to take bumps. Very thankful. So, I mean, I was very blessed. I didn't have to, I guess.
A fan is asking, you mentioned Rockin' Robin, and I know there's a story behind this, but a fan is asking why you didn't eventually jump to Titan Sports WWF.
It's not like I didn't want to, because at the time that was kind of the place. Either you were with Crockett or WCW or WWF. And if you weren't there, then you really weren't making money. I mean, there were indie promotions and there were a lot of promotions out there, but those were the ones that were making the money. Those were the ones that you wanted to be on. So it was just kind of a gradual transition of things. Like if you didn't work with Crockett anymore, then you go to WWF. And I learned how to wrestle. Just they knew that I was interested. They just were not interested in me, which is fine. I mean, it is what it is. You either are or you aren't, and I wasn't what they wanted.
Womp Biscuits, a fan, is asking, why wasn't there any women's wrestling at Jim Crockett Promotions in the 80s? Do you think the fans would have liked it? I wouldn't say there was none. Is that correct?
Oh, there was a lot, because you had like Penny Banner lived in Charlotte. She worked for them a lot in the 60s, 70s, and I believe even up until the 80s. You had Judy Martin and Leilani Kai, which were down in South Carolina. They worked a lot in the 80s up until the time they got signed with WWF. You had Misty Blue and Linda Dallas going through quite often. You had Judy Grable and Casey. There were a lot of girl wrestlers. I mean, it wasn't like, I would say probably 3 times a year. It wasn't something that they booked regularly, because it was an attraction. So probably 3 to 4 times a year that the girls would come in. And then sometimes they might do a little bit of an angle where you might have a singles match and then it would come back with like a mixed tag, the following week or something. But I wouldn't say that it was non-existent. It wasn't every week, but it was every couple of months the girls were brought in as an attraction. The same thing like with the midgets. They were an attraction also.
Mm-hmm. Which I was going to ask you this a little bit later, but given the so-called women's revolution in the WWE, where it's kind of the opposite philosophy, where women's matches were, as you say, an attraction on the card and then became the centerpiece and drawing a lot of focus. What are your thoughts on that development, aside from giving female wrestlers more opportunities? Do you think it works as a general presentation?
I love it. I love that the progression of women in our sport has been amazing, especially over like the last 10 to 15 years. Back whenever I was working in the dressing room in 85 and 86, I was the only girl, which it was kind of cool at the time, that was kind of like my realm and my kingdom type thing. There was no other girl. Um, Now I go to the dressing room and there's maybe 30 girls on the card. And I'm working with my daughter or working with NWA or a ladies' night out and things like that. There's so many that it's just 100% all girls on the card. It's amazing, and there's a lot of money to be made. The girls are beautiful. They're athletic. They've taken it way beyond what I could have ever imagined, and I'm really, really happy for them. I'm glad that they've got the opportunity, and there's so many places that the girls can go. It's not limited to like Moolah and Buddy Wolf or whoever as like the only places that you can go to be a girl wrestler. There are numerous. I mean, I couldn't even start to count how many promotions use girls and have girls as their champions.
Yeah, speaking of which, a fan on Twitter wanted to know what your thoughts were on Camille, the impressive NWA women's title holder at the moment, who seems to be a blend of finesse and skill with the China-like power.
She's amazing. Everyone say hi. This is Daisy. She had to come up and say hi. She was up in the window chilling for a second. Um, she's amazing. Whenever Camille walks into the room, she just commands attention. She very tall girl. She's like 5'10", maybe 5'11". She's been a bodybuilder. She's just got the natural physique, the natural athleticism that you're like, she's a champion. And she's got the look. NWA is very lucky to have her as their champion and as a representative of their company. But watch out, Samantha's going to come get you.
I was going to say, there you go, setting it up. Fan
Well, and you
Oklahoma.
know when Camille was first starting to wrestle, Samantha had a lot of matches with her down in South Carolina.
So
A lot.
they're familiar with each other. Well, that'll be one to definitely look for. Fan named
Fingers crossed.
Oklahoma wants to know if you keep in touch with Rockin' Robin.
Oh yes, she contacted me about being part of the Dark Side of the Ring series, getting their story out, their family story, and um, it's not like we talk every day, every week, something like that, but we're messaging back and forth on like Facebook and Twitter and stuff. So it's more of a social media um, relationship, but she knows that if she needs anything, all it takes is a phone call.
Keeping on the women's wrestling theme, Wump Biscuits is asking this time. Well, he's saying, women's wrestling today is so good, better than any other time. Thoughts on that second generation or third generation talent, Tessa Blanchard?
Tessa, amazing talent, amazing athlete. Um, if she had done this, if she was a male, if she was a boy and had done the same thing that she has done or been accused of, she'd be working in a major promotion right now. But because they're female and we're held to a higher critique, I believe, it's holding her back. I look for good things from her. I've seen really good things from her so far. I think there's a lot of jealousy involved. I think that sometimes people just try too hard, and it can kind of bite you sometimes. So you got to rein in and know your limits and know that it's not always good to push the boundaries because the boundaries push back, and then you got to start back where you were even further. So I hope Tessa nothing but the best. I really, I really, really see some good things from her. It's just, it's got to be at the right place at the right time, and people have got to be a little more accepting of. We all make mistakes, we all do dumb stuff, and oh well, we live and grow from it. But if she was a male and had done the same thing, she'd be working in a promotion right now. I can't hear you. Okay, I can't hear you. So I can see the question is about Nyla Rose and the transgender wrestlers. We're all characters. We're not, it's not an actual athletic competition between males and females. It's a scripted violence. So if you've got your character, if you can draw money, then you can be whatever you want to be.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Perfect. Sorry. One other question along the same lines with women's wrestlers are your thoughts on Charlotte Flair?
Oh, amazing. Just absolute gorgeous woman. She went to school right up the street, right up the road from me in App State, up in Boone. Um, I think she's like just exactly what the WWE needs as their female champion. You know, like what I said with Camille, when Charlotte walks in a room, you know she's a champion. She's done a lot of transitioning with her body and her look and just evolving. Just absolutely amazing.
Jake Walker wants to know, did you witness any ribs or any that stand out in your mind? That could be a discussion in and of itself for
Oh my gosh. There were so many, and that, you know, for me to explain them, it's hard to explain them without being there and being very long-winded. It's If you listen to some of the other podcasts and everything, they can tell them so much better. I was more off to myself and didn't get to partake in the tomfoolery and the whole thing, but I certainly heard about it. I just really, I'm too long-winded to go into something and it would lose in transition. So I think that's better for Cornette and some of the other guys to do.
What do you think, just in general terms, made a rib entertaining? And did you ever find that the line was crossed between entertaining and just plain mean?
Um, when you're traveling with 20 or 30 guys, of course there's going to be ribbing and funny and goofing and the whole thing. It's just part of them being boys. The stories were up in WWE where the guys were like pooping in each other's bags and doing stuff like that. That's destruction of property. You want to pull a rib to where it's memorable and it doesn't cost anything. I think is um the best rib ever is that the cost involved, because if someone has to pay several $100s to clean up your mess, it's not funny. But if it's like low cost and it's 20-30 years later you're talking about it, yeah. Which, now that we're saying that, I think I probably pulled the best rib out of all of them. I broke up with someone and I didn't take it very well, and I thought that maybe he should get magazines. And so he ended up getting like thousands and thousands of magazines over this, probably a year, maybe. I don't know how many he got because I wasn't talking to him and I wasn't talking to any of his friends, but it did me a lot to fill out all those forms, and it felt so much better just to, it was a release. So yeah, thousands of magazines. And you don't get the first magazines, you get the second magazines and then the third magazines. And then you start getting the notices that you owe, $12 or $15 or whatever. And then those start coming. So yeah, it was a gift that kept on giving.
That's incredible. A fan is asking, when are you opening up that letter from Dusty? And do you have any recollections of working with the Dream? I know fans to this day, continue to talk about that angle.
Right. We just had the 8th anniversary of his death. He passed away 8 years ago, just about a week ago. Miss him a lot, miss him at the events that I do. It was my envelope, so of course I opened it. I was the one that put the stuff in it. So yeah, I have the envelope. I think it's great that the angle, that's as far as it went, because it's the angle that was never finished and we still talk about it. And There was no way we could have topped what it's doing now, because like 30 years later, y'all are still wondering what happened, and basically so am I. So it was good. It was really good. Dusty's a genius, and just I was so blessed to be able to work with him for like the 2 years that I did. I was truly, truly blessed.
So you weren't in on the creative as to what actually was in the envelope.
No, I got to basically decide what I was going to wear. Like Dusty would kind of tell me to dress up like one of the women in Dynasty. He kind of had that idea for me to dress up more like Dynasty, but I couldn't see jumping into the wrestling ring if I was dressed like Linda Evans. But just the creativity of like what I wore and the expressions, and that if we did promos, I just had a really basic idea of what they wanted. Otherwise, it was all us. There was like no sitting down at the table discussing what moves we were going to do. It was basically just a real skeleton of an idea, and we went from there.
Do you have any thoughts, fan is asking, on Ric Flair as a person?
What you see with Ric Flair on TV is like 100% what he is in person. There's not much of a line, because he is that character. He is Ric Flair. He's had to be Ric Flair this whole time. Otherwise, Ric Flair would have never lasted. Ric Flair would have never gotten over if Ric Flair didn't believe he was Ric Flair. And 100%. He's when I saw him buying $60 pair of socks in Atlanta, Georgia, $60 for one pair of socks, I knew he's a real deal.
Did you happen to catch his quote unquote last match in July?
I was very fortunate. Yes, I was actually invited to come out and be one of his guests. I was part of the StarCast the day before and the day of. I was able to go to the matches, experience the matches. They were absolutely 100% exactly what I hope Flair wanted, and what the Flair fans and the fans of professional wrestling got exactly what they expected and what they wanted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't, his most memorable match. It wasn't the best match of the card. But for a 70-plus-year-old man to get in there and give 1,000%, and it was what he wanted, then I mean, for the true diehards, I think Shawn Michaels probably should have been it, but Flair couldn't stop at just one. If one is good, six is going to be better. Well, Flair's got to have that one more, that because that's Flair. Because if he didn't give that one more, then he wouldn't have been out there every night giving one more hour, one more Broadway, one more sold out appearance. That's Flair. He's out there just to give one more, and that's what he did.
Do you think that he'll wrestle again, as he on and off alludes to?
It's up to him, but I mean, you couldn't get any better than what you had with Andrade and Jay Lethal. I mean, they gave him the perfect match. They gave him everything, and that, of course, Flair's going to allude to it. He's never going to give up. Flair. We all know that Flair would want to die in the ring, with that 1, 2, 3 count, that final, like he died his way. Flair's living a life. I mean, he's got all his bling stores, and he's got his 420 going on, and beautiful girlfriend and beautiful family. Flair's on top, 100%.
When you look back to that time frame, that 85 to say 88, 89 in Jim Crockett Promotions, and that massive amount of talent, I know commentators have indicated if Crockett didn't buy into the UWF and try to expand, that they probably still be around today. Do you share that view? And if so, do you know why the office decided to make that move when the UWF was was basically on its last legs?
Um, I really don't know. I think more, in my opinion, it had to do with merchandising and merchandising the wrestlers, and that I think that they could have worked it better with UWF. With Kansas City didn't do that well, so you kind of want to stay grounded into what's making you your money, and then branch out accordingly. But if you're not making money on those adventures, you've got to know when to pull back. To me, it wasn't like buying up the territories, because buying up the territories was like the right thing to do rather than just going in there and taking it over.
Hmm.
I thought it had to do more with the merchandising. Like, you look at that time that WWF had gone into like the little action figures and the wrestling ring, and had taken wrestling to a whole new level of acceptance and marketability. And I think that, looking back at the merch that was offered to the Jim Crockett fans, it was so inferior to the WWF market. Like, if they'd come out with a Dusty and Magnum doll, if they'd come out like with different shirts and things like that, and really marketed their guys as something big and bad, and have their shirts something to be worn at like the country western concerts, I think that it would have changed a lot better. But back then, marketability was like, you wanted to be over, but you didn't want to be boastful about yourself. And I think that kind of got them on the wrong. To me, it was a marketing rather than the territories.
Yeah, makes sense. John Lewis is asking, how many times have you eaten at the Varsity in Atlanta?
Oh my gosh. There were quite a few. It was every week for a year and a half, maybe. It really was. It was good because it was right on the way back from the airport.
A diner type of deal or fine dining or?
It was no, it was no, it wasn't fine dining. It was like a regular just restaurant that the guys we all went to, because it was convenient. It was convenient to the hotels and TBS and the airport.
Matthew is asking who your favorite opponent was.
Well, it'd have to be Cornette. I mean, it was just perfect. His promos were brutal. His promos certainly stung. they were they were brutal, that was for sure. But it made money, and it made me like a super baby face. Like, everybody hated Cornette, but they certainly loved me.
Do you think that the Jim Cornette that we hear, mostly on the podcast and through the odd interview here and there, is that a lot of folks say, well, that's Jim's shtick, or do you think that is who the
Oh
man?
no, that's Cornette 100%. Yeah, Cornette's witty like that. He's full of the one-liners. He's always on, and it's always funny, and he's very opinionated, and he definitely will let you know his opinion.
Fair enough. A fan is asking again, Womp Biscuits, if you've seen the Dark Side of the Ring on Magnum TA, which is something that I was going to ask you about, your thoughts on that particular episode. And I know you're on the JCP Tales from the Territories too. So if you could relay your experiences with that, that would be great too.
The Magnum one was very good. I'm um considering like everything that was going on in his life at the time and since then. Um, I was nice that it concentrated just on the wreck and not like the turmoil that followed it. To me, Magnum is such an inspiration, because how many guys that would have been in his situation, where you were in a debilitating car wreck, told never, you're never going to walk again. This is it. You're never going to wrestle. This is it. Life's over. All the money you made, all the cars that you drove, the travel, your life is basically has taken a 180 in a bad direction. How many guys or females would take that and just wallow in the mud and never do nothing, never try and walk, never try and be a success, never start a business, never have a family, just waller in their sorrow, but not Magnum. Magnum proved them all wrong. I mean, he's mobile. He's got two beautiful children. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got a successful business. I just saw him this past weekend. He was signing autographs for everyone, taking pictures, except for Steamboat, had the longest line. People lined up to see him. Just happy guy. He knows he's blessed. He's been through, there's not anyone out there that can say that God handed Magnum a big old pile and Magnum got through it and is smiling to this day. But to me, it's an inspiration, you can feel sorry for yourself all you want to, but look at what Magnum did. Magnum went from the very, very top to the very, very bottom in like a split second. And he could have stayed at the bottom, but no, he got up and got going. And it took him a while. And I'm sure it wasn't the easiest paths to travel, and that, being able to be mobile and being able to get into your big truck and do business and not feel sorry for yourself and just keep going on and make a good life for yourself and your family and your kids and your wife. That's an inspiration in my book, 100%.
Do you, just as a follow up to that, do you recall the atmosphere in Crockett Promotions when that happened? And are you of the view that that was really a tipping point in terms of the fortunes of the company?
Right. I was in Kansas City at the time. I had just left Crockett in Charlotte and had gone to Crockett. I guess it was a satellite office in Kansas City. This was, I believe, in October, if I'm not sure, October or November. But just one of those darling, this was before the internet, before, Wi-Fi or email or anything. You picked up the phone, got the phone call like that early morning that Magnum had been in a really bad wreck, that he wasn't expected to walk, and that it was really bad, is basically the phone call that I got. And then as the days and weeks progressed, we got more and more information on it. I definitely think that it was something that you could look at, like things started to like fall apart because they had put so much into Magnum and now they didn't have Magnum anymore. And it was also, I think, a sadness on Dusty's part, like here he had lost his best friend and his traveling partner, and his buddy for life had, gone through this. And so like, now what do we do? So it was a lot. It really was. And Magnum, being world champion and a movie star and everything, just one of those situations where you actually could see someone that could have had it all.
Yeah, but like you touched on, what an inspirational episode, quite the standout in my view of this season so far.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, and could have definitely, like, oh, I could have been world champion. I could have been a movie star. I could have done this. He definitely picked up the pieces and put them back together and made a whole new picture out of what was given to him.
Yeah, absolutely, good for him. Loggy Doggy wants to know: did you know Jerry Jarrett, who passed this past year as well?
I had met him a couple of times, just and briefly, like at FanFest. I really didn't know him that well.
Fair enough. Another fan is asking if you ever had the opportunity to work with Hulk Hogan.
I have never met Hulk Hogan. My husband, my father-in-law, brother-in-law, all of them worked with Hogan up in WWE, but because of scheduling and travel and everything, just I've never met him.
John is asking, whether who had the biggest crowd pop, the Von Erichs or the Rock and Roll Express?
Oh my gosh.
That's a tough one.
It's it's equal. I mean, after you get to a certain point, I mean, because you had like the Von Erichs like kissing all the girls, going to the ring. They had the kids and the everybody like standing on the ring waiting for the autographs. The same thing like with the only thing that I can say is Rock and Roll Express, definitely because they lasted longer. They're still touring. They're still out on the road. Just the longevity of it. I don't think that the Von Erichs could have put in the time and effort that Ricky and Robert did, because Ricky and Robert sincerely for like decades have done this. Von Erichs were just popular for a couple of years and just totally burned out. I would have to give it to Ricky and Robert just for the fact that they're still out there. They're still drawing crowds. People pay to see them. People pay money for their autographs. They line up. I put Ricky and Robert over.
Fair enough. A fan on social media sent me a question, wanted me to ask you about when you were brought into JCP as the valet for Tully Blanchard, how the Perfect 10 moniker happened, and that slap, was it as stiff as it seemed to be on TV?
The moniker for Perfect 10, of course, was to get heat. Because if I was the Perfect 10, if I was like the Bo Derek lookalike or Farrah Fawcett, I wouldn't have gotten the heat that I did, because the whole argument was, well, she's no 10. Well, yes, I am. Tully said so. So it all worked out, because that gave me the, Dusty could call me a 0 and Tully can call me a Perfect 10 and just go from there. Hello, Kat. The both slaps, Tully and Dusty were both fairly stiff, especially Tully's. But Dusty's wasn't so bad, but Tully especially was, just because it was so heated, and the yelling and the screaming and the back and forth, and it just built up. So definitely both of them were stiff, but they look good. They had to. I mean, you couldn't work it at that point and have it mean anything.
Did you looking back on the career of Tully, do you think that he really left a lot of good stuff on the table in terms of moving forward when he left Vince and was going to return to WCW at the time, and then just kind of disappeared off the scene?
Yeah, he could have definitely had at least 3 or 4 really good years, but sometimes it's not your choice. Sometimes your choices make your decisions whether you want them to or not, and that's like with Tully. He just made some poor decisions and got caught, and just even though he'd been doing the same thing for years and years and years before that, this time it mattered, and this time to these people it mattered. And unfortunately, I think we've all gotten fired from like really good jobs, and we didn't know why we got fired from really good jobs. But I think that happened to Tully. It just happened to him on a more grandiose scale, and more people knew about it.
Speaking along the same lines, a fan also sent me a question, wanted to get your thoughts on working with and being around Ole Anderson in terms of his reputation of being somewhat difficult.
Oh yeah, Ole was a grumpy old fart. No matter, he got really upset because he found out how much Cornette and I were making on the Great American Bashes, and that we were like main event or semi-main just about every night. But we were the angle that was brought up to draw the money. and that he was like maybe fourth or fifth match, and still making good money. But because a girl and Cornette made more than he did, he was not happy with that. But oh well, I think we drew, so that's all that counted.
What did you think of his mind for the business in terms of booking and his promo ability? I personally, as a fan, I thought that was underrated in terms of his
I
belief.
really didn't get to work that much with Ole. I mean, he was brought in to be more like a mentor for Arn because Arn was doing so well. And then, of course, the Four Horsemen took off from there, and then I wasn't there anymore. So I really I can't really say because I wasn't around it that much. I only got to see Ole as a worker rather than a booker.
Fair enough. And speaking of the Horsemen, there were a lot of fans on social media that wanted to ask kind of one of those questions that always comes up in terms of JCP talent, and that is, in your opinion, what was the best incarnation of the Four Horsemen?
Oh, I don't know whether, I mean, Ole was good, but I think Barry in there was better because he could work more. I think Ole as like someone you call in as a special agent type thing. Of course, you've got JJ, Arn, Flair, Tully, and then with mine, I know Ole was, the backbone at the very first, but I really like Barry in there instead of Ole.
Yeah, that's hard to argue. Jake wants to know what the biggest bar tab you've ever witnessed. That might cover some ground too, right?
Me personally, or for someone else? I mean,
I'm thinking of workers in the business.
oh gosh,
Is it Flair?
it would have to be Flair, but then it was a bunch of guys all put in together. So I don't know if he wants like one all together, like one person by themselves, or like if we all put in all together and like, okay, there's 10 of us, everybody pays 10%, which I think that might have been it. There was like 10 of us and we were all going to do 10%, and it was something like 7 grand, but we had a bunch of people drinking on that, so it wasn't that bad. So it was like 700, but then I had like 4 people drinking with me, so it was a lot more than, it wasn't bad.
The trays of kamikazes that
Oh my
Flair.
Lord. I've left tables full of drinks. It's shameful, like the amount of liquor I've walked away because I wanted to stay conscious. I had to get up the next day. Like the next day I still had to be conscious and get to the airport and look decent. And these guys, they could roll out and look like anything, but I usually had like a flight and 300 miles the next day. So I had to I knew how to rein back.
Yeah, incredible. Another Horseman question from a fan. Won't Biscuits wants to know, would Gino Hernandez, and this is another one that comes up perennially, do you think he would have made a good Horseman had he lived and jumped to Crockett?
Um, I think his character would have worked out really well, especially like tagging with you've either got Arn and Tully that could tag up. You could also have Tully and Gino tag up. Then you've got Gino and Arn, and then you can leave Flair off to himself to be the champion. So you've got a bunch of situations you could make stuff. The only problem with that is that I've learned that Gino did not want to leave Texas. Gino would go. He went to Florida for a couple of weeks, went right back home. Gino went up to New York for like a week, went right back home. I think he would have fit really well, but he wouldn't have wanted to leave Texas. And that travel was one of the main things that Crockett was doing that was so unique to the time, because before with territories, you drove a lot, but Crockett, especially in 85, 86, had opened it up to more flying, because we were going to Baltimore and Philadelphia and New York to the Meadowlands. And then you had Richmond. You had Norfolk and Richmond on like Thursday and Friday. Well, then you had to be in Atlanta at 7 o'clock Saturday morning. That was impossible, to drive. I mean, you could have done it, but it would have been horrible to drive from Richmond to Atlanta as much as we would have had to have driven. So it just changed a lot,
Ivan is asking, why did you never work Puerto Rico?
It was too dangerous. Tully thought that with my character and the heat that I was able to generate, that he did not want something happening to me, and that Puerto Rico was really rough and I would fight back. And Brody may not have been the only one that ended his career in Puerto Rico. Tully just knew that how much heat I was able to get at that time, that it would have been dangerous for me to go.
Keeping in the travel vein, Steve-O is asking, in all your travels, what country was on your bucket list but you never visited?
Oh my gosh. Would have liked to have gone to Japan. I think Japan would have been really, really good. I like the idea of the cleanliness, the manners, the food. Just I think Japan would have been really good, really good. Okay, one more question, and then I've got to go fix supper for my family.
Absolutely, I appreciate your time. Let me see. How about this one? We'll end on this one. This is a good one. Jacob is asking, was there anybody you ever wanted to manage or saw somebody that you thought you could take them to the championship?
Oh my goodness. Who I really like working with is my daughter. And not that, it's someone that I never worked with, but I really like working with her. I like working NWA. It's their motto is kind of wrestling done right. They really are, especially in the women's division. We were talking about the women's division before. They're really taking the girls to the next level. They're letting a lot of different girls come in, a lot of different girls work against each other. They're having really good matches. We just had the hardcore team war where it was 2 teams against 4, where Samantha won that at the end. That was very ingenious. The girls were hard hitting on that one. I really like working with Samantha. I really do.
Well, where can fans find you on social media and keep up with all that you have going on, Babydoll?
Oh my gosh. I'm very active on Twitter and Facebook. Both of them, just put in my first name, Nicola, Nickla, and I'll pop up, and I'm there every day.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for your time. You've been, again, very generous. The fans have really enjoyed it, and we'll keep in touch and keep on top of everything that you have going on, including with your daughter. Best of luck to her.
Super. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Take care.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.